Going right into our next presentation, I'd like to welcome Robert to the stage to, in a perfect segue, discuss tribal consultation.
I'm just waiting for him to pop up now. Can you, there? Okay. Can you hear me? Hurry up and wake it up then, because when in my time. I have it on a flash just in case if you need it. Okay, I mean, but I have it on a flash if that will make it. Okay. All right, Hekate mai ochkate Consultation, Robert Geary, Hake Lembach, Tawal Kit, Habematolel tip. How are all of you today? My name is Robert Geary. I'm from Alem, which is on the southern part of the lake, and I work for Habematolel, which is, you know, a little bit up the road here, and I'm their Tribal Historic Preservation Officer and also Director of Cultural Resources, and I'm also the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer designee for the Koi Nation, so for 2 tribes. My presentation today is on understanding tribal consultation, also the sensitivity of Lake County and the area where we're at for the permitting processes, the laws that are actually set into place, and some of the actions that both the counties and tribal communities need to collaborate on in understanding the policies that protect and preserve tribal cultural resources. So, so today, yeah, just kind of going into understanding, you know, the tribal consultation process as far as, you know, the reasoning for and importance for tribal consultation. Also, understanding the dynamics, I think, here in Lake County, which is really kind of nowhere else. You have 7 federally recognized tribes that are in the county. All, you know, different individual nations, different individual traditions and cultures and languages. And so with that, it really makes, you know, Lake County itself unique. With Lake County being the oldest freshwater lake in actually Northern America, really makes this place, you know, valuable, I think, as far as for sustainability of, you know, of life and habitation. And so we've known this, and our people have known this. You know, we've basically inhabited, you know, every area that's around the lake. And so understanding that and knowing, you know, what the process is for AB 52, tribal consultation, SB 18, general plan amendments and updates, NAGPRA, repatriation of items that have been, you know, found, AB 168, which is an amendment that, or fixed SB 35, which basically streamlined affordable housing and took tribal consultation out of the process. But now that AB 168 exists, we're back there, back at the table. Also, I also wanted to ensure that, especially with the permitting processes, it seems like here in Lake County, categorical exemption seems to be coming across my table very frequently with no determination on how sensitive areas are to make it a categorical exempt project. And so just making sure, that, the tribes are doing their due diligence and making sure, and also that the county are being held accountable to making sure that the tribes are being notified for these categorical exemptions and statutory exemptions in projects that might impact or can impact, cultural sensitive sites. A lot of the times, that I've asked people, can you tell me what a tribal cultural resource is? A lot of people say burials, arrowheads, and mortars, and those kind of things. Tribal cultural resources are definitely a lot more than just those things, and in the bid I'll go into the categories that those fall under. I really wish I had my PowerPoint because you can get a visual from that. No pressure, but we'll just go with it. So just explaining a little bit about California. California, like I said before, it's really unique. There's no other state that's like it. 109 federally recognized tribes here within the state, and over 60 that are filing for federal recognition. I think the next state that's close to California is probably Alaska. So, definitely the dynamics here are different than anywhere else. Like I said, just in Lake County itself, you have 7 federally recognized tribes that are in one location in one county. A lot of shared territories, really highly sensitive. An old place where, our people have, hey, there it is, there you go. Now you can see all my cool pictures. Maybe not. There you go. That's a teaser. I gave you guys a teaser. Yeah. So, but yeah, so 109 federally recognized tribes, like I said, it's really unique. I think California itself, linguistically, there's, we're actually 2 in the world next to New Guinea, and having so many different languages in one state. New Guinea, I think, is number 1 in the world. So definitely, like I said, a really, the dynamics here are definitely different. Like I said, at least over 60 non-federally recognized tribes. The whole Bay Area are filled with Native Americans that are down from that area, but not one federally recognized tribe in the area. And so, it's really disturbing. My kids, my children are, half, from, down in Santa Clara area. And, they still practice their ceremonies and dances. And so, very important to know that even though in today's time and day, that, there's still communities that aren't recognized. So, tribal variations range across the state. A lot of intermarriages that have happened, like I said, with me and my wife who's down from the Bay Area. From, even me having relatives from here all the way out to the coast. We're all familiar with each other. We all know each other. We all still have that connection with one another. So those things are very important to know. You talk to one of us, somebody down the line will hear about it, and you'll be tomorrow's gossip. So definitely one of those things to know. Some of the things just to give you a little bit of a background, I think here, not just in California, but here, in Lake County itself, like I said, there are 7 federal recognized tribes that are here in the county. The oldest lake in Northern America. One of the things that a lot of people don't know is that, Pomo wasn't the name that we gave ourselves. Pomo was basically something that was given to us by an anthropologist. To me, Pomo, the word Pomo actually is a location. It's not a name. The word po actually comes from the magnesite that we actually make a bead out of, which a lot of people refer to as Pomo gold, because it was high in currency, high in value. And Mo was the cave where it was mined. And so, Mr. Krober actually thought it'd be kind of cool to put that together and say, you guys kind of talk all the same, so I'm going to call you all Pomo. That's kind of how it got honed. I'm from Alem. Alem Umtiwi, Alem man. Umti is something that's native, somebody that's like me. So, like I said, it's definitely something. Let me catch myself up. Now my remote doesn't work. Oh, there you go. Right there. Right, that's where I'm at. So understanding the perspective here at Lake County, we kind of get caught up on, like just checking a box. As long as, we talk to one, I talk to all. Definitely not here. The word Kanaktai is actually mispronounced. It's called Kanoktai, and it actually means old mountain women. That comes from the southeastern, which is down from where I'm from. How their perspective is, or how our perspective is of the mountain. Both peaks actually represent from our creation stories an old woman. And so that's the name of the southeastern Pomo. Coming from this side, from where my mother's from over in Big Valley, it's called the Nobitin, which means big mountain. If you take a look at it, one peak hides behind the other, and it's a perspective. And these both have to be taken into account, and is really on the understanding of, like, the tribes are individuals. The perspective and the connection that they have with their land are individually from their villages, and not looked at as a whole. We all don't live in teepees. We all don't, kind of go into the same, modern stigmas that, we see and we hear every day. First contact here was in 1833. That was the very first time we seen someone who was not native. Happened to be the fur company, the Hudson Bay Fur Company happened to come through. A lot of the Pomo were affected by loss of land, slavery, disease, mining, missions, and not able to practice or speak our languages. So we lost a lot during that time. But the main thing is that, we're all still here. At one point before contact, they estimated us close to be about 1 million within the state. By the time 1900 came, we were about 16,000, basically a small town. It's what happened. It's true. It's not a good history or a nice history, but it's what happened. We're lucky that things are starting to change. Laws are starting to be introduced. Thank you. Laws are starting to be introduced to be able to protect and preserve what we have left. Some of those laws that are being introduced today, policies are changing consistently to be able to protect and preserve the history of the indigenous people that are from the area. It's not always taken well because it's change. Change is happening. So luckily, I've got the honor to meet, Governor Brown. So today, federal, state, and local laws usually require project environmental impacts to be assessed. So anytime a project that happens, there needs to be an environmental assessment that happens. Tribal cultural resources are a part of the environment. This is something that is by law to make sure that every impact environmentally is assessed, and that there's not going to be any detriment to the community, to the people, and to the history. The parties proposing the project must attempt to find ways to avoid or to mitigate environmental damages before they can proceed. These requirements apply to projects on public land and often apply to projects on private property. This is one of the things to remember. We've been here for a very long time. Because we are in one of the oldest freshwater lakes, or the oldest freshwater lakes in Northern California, we inhabited the area. the land use that we had wasn't just confined to the village that we lived on. We also had land tracts, lineal land tracts. From where I'm from, we actually had families that owned land tracts from the shoreline all the way up into the mountains. And every part of that land tract was used at different times of the year. We have archaeologists that are come around today that are saying, well, there shouldn't be anything here. It's not significant enough to be able to determine or to make sure that there's a good assessment that's done and to make sure that it's not significant enough to the tribe. Because of AB 52, now we are at the table to be able to consult about our concerns for projects that can impact those sites. Archaeology and cultural resources are considered part of the environment. The Native American Heritage Commission maintains an inventory of sites in California that are important to tribes and reviews environmental impact documents to protect these sites from damages and destruction. So it's important to make sure that these these assessments are done, are conducted. It's important to make sure that you conduct and include, and that there's inclusion with the tribe in this process, for the fact that the archaeologist is not the expert on me. And that's the reason for AB 52. Because now it created another category. Another category called tribal cultural resources. Policies have changed where tribal traditional knowledge is also considered expert opinion. This whole time we've been considered not to know about our history, not to know about who we are, where we came from, not to know about the pieces of our communities and where they stood, where they stand, and how important they are to us. That wasn't anything that we knew. This is what the government was coming to when they created these laws. But now things have changed. Times have changed. Next. So over time, they started creating, these laws that have, went into effect and are helping to make things better for us. From 48, 68, 1970, I believe, the CEQA was created. 78, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. And so I don't want to really tell my age, but, that was enacted in 78. I started actually doing my ceremonies in 75. So for 3 years of my lifetime, I was breaking law. And so it's not that far back, right? 1990, NAGPRA, basically the ability to go and fight for all your ancestral remains, right? Their burial associated items. This is not that far off. SB 18, 2004, right? Now in the general plan, when things are starting to be assessed as far as for, development, improvements to both communities and cities, we actually get a seat at the table to address our concerns. 2014, AB 52 kicks in. The tribes are also able to address their concerns for projects and developments that happen both in cities and counties. 2020, AB 168, not that far away, right? So just as a little side note, SB 35 actually was approved in 2017. So that means for 3 years, they got to go through without consulting the tribes on these development projects. Just imagine what we lost in 3 years before this amendment happened. So next, can I get you next slide? So the next slide is to go into further detail about what cultural resources are, because a lot of people do not know what tribal cultural resources are. So I'm going to cut it into 4 categories. And so You'll get a better understanding exactly of some of the things that I think the indigenous communities are out there determining on their concerns on how sensitive project areas are, what kind of mitigation measures to actually put into place to protect those. Preservation in place should definitely be at the top and work your way down. Monitoring is really recovery. When we have to send out a monitor, it's actually the worst case scenario because we know impacts are going to happen, and at least we're going to have somebody there to be able to recover those. Ancestors, ancestral burial associated items, village items, soils, everything that goes along with our community is a part of that. A lot of people don't really know, even understand what midden is. Does anybody know what midden is? Yeah, guys are all cool people. So for you that don't know, actually midden is oils from your body that actually get absorbed in soil. Living in an area for so many years, you'll be a part of that soil. You'll be a part of that community, that land. And so you're able to actually go into an area and look at the soil to be able to determine whether it's been, if there's been habitation just by the color of soil. So, with more input and investigation as well. So I'm going to explain tribal cultural resources next. So the definition of tribal cultural resources, and this is under section 21047 or 74 under Public Resource Code. So tribal cultural resource, and this is the reason why AB 52 exists. Tribal cultural resources are sites, features, places, cultural landscapes, sacred places, and objects with cultural value to a tribe that are listed or determined to be eligible for a listing in the National or State Register of Historical Resources, or listed in local register historic resources, or resources that the lead agency determine in its discretion are cultural resources. So just to know now that there are actually some tribes that are creating their own cultural registries. They're taking inventory of their places. There's more detail to the information that the tribe has because it's not only getting the scientific information from the Chris Center, which are all the archaeological prehistoric sites that they have registered with the state, but also the information that we have from our elders. So when we come to the consultation table, we have a more defined and detailed information about a project site. Next. So, number one, Native American remains and grave-related artifacts are tribal cultural resources. Different type of burials may occur in one area inhabited by the same tribe, especially if it was inhabited over an extended period of time. There are no ways to generalize about the burial practices of Native Californians because it changed, right? From where I was from, originally we would cremate, right? And here is actually a picture from where I'm from. On the island all the way out to the right there was our original cremation place. And then you can see our burial grounds in the forefront. It changed. It changed over time due to survival. Just making sure that, it took a big, huge pyre in order to burn our ancestors a long time ago. When the new settlers came in and a lot of the horrific things that had happened to not indicate where we were, where our location was, we had to stop. And so our burial practices started. So there's no way to sit there and say, okay, well, this is exactly how natives did it, because we had to adapt with time, right? Next. 2, traditional cultural sites. Our villages, campsites, gathering, harvesting areas, quarries, tools, manufacturing areas, rock paintings, carvings areas, and burial grounds. These places are all around us today. Everywhere that you look, especially next to waterways, are definitely sensitive. Anytime a project happens that I know that it's next to a waterway or an area where it looks as if it provides a lot of vegetation, especially medicinal or foods that I know we used, I deem it sensitive. Here you can take a look and there's a waterway that's down the middle. All of those little dots and the bigger circles that are there, that's not nature, right? That's habitation. Those are all house pits. So when we make determinations and we look at these sensitive areas, this is something that this is the reason why we are at the table, to protect that. My ancestors, my great-grandmothers and grandfathers, uncles and aunts have lived there. Their oils that I talked about that are in the soil are there. To destroy that is an environmental justice issue. It's taking my history, taking my connection, taking who I am off of the earth, out of this place. And so this is why it's important. Number 3, religious or spiritual sites, right? Every day we get up and we go and we take a look at Mount Konocti. This is Mount Konocti. For all tribes here, Konocti is definitely a spiritual place. We all know this. We know that this happens. So traditional locations for events or sites with spiritual significance, dance ground, a place for gathering traditional medicines, a place for an Indian doctor or shaman to gather its spiritual strength. This can be a prominent peak, which most of the times it is too as well. There's a lot of them that are around the lake. Or cave, right? So we're not just talking about the village sites, we're talking about all the significant sites. Something that we look at every day. It's important because our elders actually went and looked towards where that mountain was and prayed to that every day. So those are important to us. So when permitting or going in for any permitting for projects, now aesthetics, view sheds, landscapes are a part of this consideration. Next. And this is what everyone thinks, just tribal cultural resources usually. Cultural remains left by the past peoples. Artifacts often found in California may be found or modified fish or animal bones, shell, stone tools, or wood. This is usually what is looked at. The important thing is that we educate, the Planning Commission, all the people that we're having to sit down and consult with about what TCRs really are. And so I kind of put it into 4 categories. The place where I was born and we no longer have, even though that was the nucleus of my village, of where I'm from. So very important to know. When permitting happens, these are the things that we're protecting. This is the importance of the indigenous people that are from here. Anytime consultation happens between a tribe and any agency, it's usually a hard thing for the agency to understand the tribal perspective, because we're looking at everything. We're looking at a place from where my grandfather used to go and pray to the mountain, to the place of where we just talked about water resources and water rights, and about the history of what that water holds. One of the biggest, next to acorn, resources that we had, especially specific to here, which was the hitch. Next. So why are TCRs still being found? Hundreds of thousands of indigenous people living in California, right? That's just how it was. For tens of thousands of those years, the construction of countless villages, centers, religious ceremony sites, and houses holding the remains of hundreds of thousands of ancestors and artifacts ranging from the spiritually sacred to everyday tools. So I want to explain this map to you just a little bit so you can kind of see its volume, right? So this is 3 counties. So you see Lake County, you see Mendo County, and then you see Sonoma County. Sonoma County I don't have the information for, so it's not entirely complete. So every symbol, every red dot, every triangle X that you see there are prehistoric cultural sites that are registered with the state of California, that have been found from the beginning of time to today. And this is the stopper. It's not everything. That is only 5% that has been digitized and that has been put into this map. Can you imagine when we get the other 95? So these are the things that are really important to understand, the sensitivity of the area and the place that we live in. Not that, hey, we're saying no to everything. Hey, don't do this. The importance is the inclusion and knowing the history that we have here. This isn't none of those dots are the dots that I put on a map. Those are the dots that the archaeologists in the state put on the map. And those are the things that we are trying to protect through permitting. Those are the sites and the connections that we have that make it important from not just our generation, but the generations after us to know the connection that we have to our home. Next. So to know that, you have to understand some of these laws that are set into place. And we think laws that are something that's just followed. There are a lot of municipalities that don't follow law. A lot of municipalities that don't understand law. And so here's where we get to educate each other about that. This is a day and a time now to where the tribes have the ability to address concerns, how to protect, how to preserve their history and where they come from. I show this picture. You can see on one side, it shows the mortars and the arrowheads and those kind of things. But to know historically how a lot of these items were taken, a lot of these items that we were looking at in these museums that are out there, how they were obtained. This is a picture that was back in 1906, I believe. And it was a native from here who was being told by a person who wanted a collection and told him to dig up his ancestor and take not only just his remains, but the things that were buried with him so she can send out. This is proof. If you don't believe me, go to the Huntington Museum and check this out. That this is how our history was taken. This is how our history was. So it's not, even though that you see, sometimes you kind of go, they just got a chip on their shoulder. This is just how it is. But this was the history. This is the true history. This is not anything that you're going to see in a book or read in a book. This is just how it was. We all know this. We know this. But in order for us to be able to create a relationship and a collaboration, we all know, development has to happen. But it can happen respectfully. It can happen honestly. But in order for that to happen, we have to acknowledge what happened. That's the first step. Next. So, with that said, like I said, CEQA was enacted in 1970. The reasoning for it, or the mandate for it, is each public agency shall mitigate or avoid the significant effects on the environment of projects that it will carry out or approve whenever it is feasible to do so. This is under Public Resource Code. Those parties that are involved are state and local agencies, which are your your cities and counties and your state, right? The public, right? Applicants, the people who are applying, or the developers who are applying to do these projects. Consultants, OPR, resources, AG's office. All of these parties are the ones that are involved when CEQA kicks in. And they're all involved because their intentions, or the intent is for them to follow CEQA. Next. So at a state level, for tribal cultural resource protection, set under CEQA, it makes the environmental protection a mandatory part of every California state and local agency decision-making process. These current laws create a process to assess what is left of tribal cultural sites and do not further damage during the development process. So to be able to hold and preserve what we have left. SB 18, it just was actually out at a consultation for a general plan update and amendment today. This was in '04. Local government must contact and consult with California Indian tribes, Native American tribes, prior to amendment or an adoption of a general plan, specific or designated, of open space. In my consultation today, the most updated one that I got was in 2008. From what I understand, that's supposed to be updated every 5 years. So, a little behind the times there. The law for AB 52 was actually kicked in 2014, so a lot of laws and policies have changed. So it's really important to know that updates and the timelines for those updates are integrated. Assembly Bill AB 52. The purpose of identifying and avoiding, preserving in place, or mitigating impacts to tribal cultural resources during the development of a project via the CEQA process. So once a project happens or becomes a project, basically in 14 days, they're supposed to notify us that the project was going on, the project's gonna happen. We have 30 days to be able to respond and research. And so we just wanna make sure that, preserving and preservation in place, if this is not what we're gonna do, and this cannot happen, then we need to come up with a plan of how to go forward and still make sure that we protect what we have. Whether it's redesign, whether it's, monitoring, whether it's, whatever it is, to be able to come up with the plan. AB 168, there was an oversight in Senate Bill 35, and that they did not consider the potential destruction of tribal cultural resources listed on historic register or potentially eligible for listing on the historic registry. Like I said, that was actually approved in 17, and the amendment happened in 20. So for 3 years, we went through where we couldn't even consult on projects that were going to impact our resources. Next. At a federal level, Section 106 NEPA, federal agencies that will issue federal funding, and that happens a lot here where a lot of funds come from the feds. Permits, authorizations, or assistance to a project proponent undertaking must take into account the effect that their, trying to read it. Must take into account that the effect of their undertaking will have on historic properties and must consult with Native American tribes and the Historic Preservation Officer, and must take measures to avoid, minimize, or resolve the adverse effects to historic properties and traditional cultural properties in advance of their undertaking. So Caltrans, Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Forest Department, Army Corps, Bureau of Reclamation, goes on, federal agencies. This is what they're mandated to do. This is the process of permitting and what is supposed to happen. There's no getting around this, even though sometimes people think that there isn't. Even categorical exemptions, statutory exemptions that are being listed now are something that literally has to go through a process for assessment of making sure that it's not going to impact tribal cultural resources even before it gets that categorical exemption. It's the law. It's there. So we have to make sure and hold accountable the people who are not following this. And we as tribes can only do that when we're working together. And not just working together as just the tribes, but with our counties and with our cities to make sure that development that occurs is following process. The process is set into place to make sure that there's no erasure of me, right? That the history that is in the ground and that is on top is still here. And that we have to be able to come up with a plan for development, because we want development too, to make sure that we're not erased. And so that's why these laws were set into place. Next. One of the other things of understanding is tribal cultural knowledge. The tribes have been for years trying to explain, especially to scientists and a lot of people who are making these determinations on whether or not something is significant or not, or how sensitive is it, based on just the things that have been found by archaeologists, just the things that have been published by anthropologists. Okay, well, the things that have been found by archaeologists were made by us. The things that have been published by anthropologists were told to them by us. So traditional knowledge is an important part of making determination of how detailed and how sensitive an area is. Because we've always been here. We've always, had that connection with the land. We've always went and harvested. We've always prayed and did our ceremonies. We've not stopped. And so those are the things that when we consult, we're now seeing that policy has changed where it's integrated into, this process. So it's not taking just what science has to offer, but also what the community itself, who are still practitioners, who are still doing these things today, bring to the table and say, hey, how can we create a plan that still incorporates me and saves my footprint here, but to be able to still have a new hospital and do that. Let's work together to make that happen. And that's the way it is. So we're starting to understand and know the value of the knowledge that our communities have. And we're able to use that in consultation. We're able to be looked at as experts, right? For the longest time, archaeologists have came to the table and they were considered even the experts on us. And I always put this analogy out there. It's like when you feel sick and you feel like a little cough, who knows better when you're not on? You, right? Who knows you better when you're not feeling the way that you should be? Is you, right? Well, just up until, a couple of years ago, everybody knew about us better than us. And it's offensive. And so to be able to have a good understanding and a detailed picture to make a good determination on a project site, how to mitigate, how to, deal with inadvertent discoveries of a community, ask that community. Include that community. Pomo people are world-renowned for the basketry, right? We're world-renowned for what we're able to do with items that we got from our environment. That connection to the environment is knowing what's there, where it's at, when to go and get it, how long it's been there, how to get there, right? All of that information. And so when a project has to happen, it's our communities that can bring that information forward. How can we create something to go forward without destroying that picture? Let's work together to be able to do that. Next. So what do we do? So the next thing that we do is, what does my department do, is we stay current on state and federal laws for the protection of tribal cultural resources. That's what my office does. So I go back and make sure that, has there been any amendments? Has there been new laws set into place? Has there been any new policies that are set into place? When I go to consultation with both state and federal and local agencies, to make sure that all of that is on the table when we're discussing preservation, when we're discussing this. Making sure that everyone is on the same table or at the same level of understanding of what it's going to take. Mitigate processes for inadvertent discoveries, to create a plan that if an inadvertent discoveries, how is the tribe going to want to deal with those? How do we want to deal with those? Items are ours, those ancestors are ours, their associated items are ours. We should have a say on how that's done. We also collect and research archival material, because what we do is we take the scientific, because we know it's hard for engineers, especially and archaeologists, to understand that, you got to have the science, and then you also got to have the knowledge, right, as far as what comes with it, traditional knowledge. So we combine that, and we bring that to the table. And we say, okay, either we can do a redesign, or hey, let's maybe bring in some engineered fill, let's put it in, let's not impact what's down there, let's find a way to be able to do it. There's always a way, but everyone has to be willing to work together. Every time that we're out there, we're finding new places, we're finding new locations, we're finding new sites. So we record those. So for later on down the line, when there's another road that basically has to go through it, at least we know, hey, the last time we were out here, we found this, right? We also have a GIS that creates maps for us that shows all the sensitive sites that we have. So we can bring to consultation to show them what the state has on registry. So they could also determine whether or not the archaeologist or the CRM firm that they've contracted is doing their due diligence and making sure they're bringing all of that information to the table. We also do land surveys and making sure that all of those areas that we know that where we've gathered, where we've gone to collect, where we've gone to go pray, or that if they're the areas that are going to be impacted by project sites. And we also train our monitors, and not only our monitors, but we train equipment operators and everyone else that's going to be on project sites of what to look for. What we're out there looking for. That if there's something that I see, I need you to slow down, I need you to stop, let me get in there, let me assess this, let me evaluate this, and do what I have to do when I'm there. So to be proactive. Next. One of the important things, and this is something that we always let anthropologists and archaeologists know, because everyone's caught on the past of like, oh, well, this is who you guys are, used to be. This is where, no, we're still those people that still have that traditional knowledge. My elders and people that were teaching me are from my mom's territory. My uncle's from where I'm from, both places. My uncle that passed away a few years back, my Uncle Nelson, he was 100 when he passed away. Think about how much knowledge that is, right? And it's still being used today. We still gather, Big Valley, we still do the Tule Boat Festival that's over there, that knowledge that's being, passed down from generation to generation of how we utilize and how the connection that we had with our environment and how we used it is still being done. Ceremonies are still happening today. A lot of people don't realize it, don't even know that this is going on. We're dancing for, the healing of basically this area, this land, this world, this us, everyone who's native and who's non-native, to make sure that everybody's okay as humans, to be good human beings. Those things are happening in this community, in this land, every year, right? And just making sure that we still understand working with our environment is a crucial thing to teach to the next generation. I'm at a point in my life now where, I have children, and now I'm having grandchildren. And to make sure that that knowledge continues to the next generation. Where are those important places, right? Where are those times where we got to go and pray? Where we see, a building that stands there that, hey, that used to be the place where your grandfather used to go and catch fish. But we still have to be able to understand and open ourselves up to what's happened here in this county, the dynamics here in this county, the importance here in this county to the indigenous people, right? And so the understanding can only really happen to that when you come and you ask us and talk to us. So it's not something that has happened in the past and that no longer exists. It's still happening today. Still hunt today. We still do ceremony today. We still gather today. We still go and do these things today. So it doesn't stop. The same road that my grandfathers and aunts and uncles used to be able to go out to the coast to go and gather, I still travel that same way, that same pathway. The same place that we used to stay, we still stay today. And so that's a continuum of tribal cultural knowledge that is getting passed down from one generation to the next, and it's still happening. A lot of people don't realize, because we go off of statistics that have been given to us nationally, right? They first had us here 8,000 to 10,000 years ago. Then somebody finds something else, which we've been telling. We've been here from the beginning of time, right? Then next thing you know, it changes from 10 to 12,000. And now I think it's from 12 to 14,000. Nobody's talking about the arrowhead that was found in my backyard that was tested 23,000. And that's not a definite. I say it's before that, right? No one's talking about that. And that was here in Lake County. So, next. So this is a saying that I leave everyone with, and this is, I think I deserve a little extra time because somebody went into my time earlier, so I'm taking it anyway. So what is in the ground and on top are the cultural resources of our people. It holds our history, our identity, and our connection to this land. And I'll always say that. In my language, when I say Alembak, it actually means, when you break it down in the meaning for it, it actually means the land of Alem owns me. And it's an ownership that cannot be broken. So it's like, you're standing there and something happens and your arm gets cut off. And it's rolling down this aisle right here. And somebody walks in and goes, wow, whose arm is that? Everyone here is going to go, that's Bob's arm. Even though it's not connected to me, it's still an ownership that it's always going to be mine. The same ownership to the land is the same ownership that I have to it, or that it has to me. And it's not that I own the land, it's that the land owns me. And so that's a value, that's a cultural value. No matter where I go, no matter where I live, no matter what, I'm always going to be from Alem, the land of Alem. And so that's one thing to know, that this is why every tribe, because we all have that connection. Every tribe is there to preserve what they have left, to protect what they have left. And it doesn't have to be such a fight when we can all understand each other and know each other of really who we are. When there's inclusion for all of our communities to be able to come together and really know, about who we really are, it makes it that more important, and there's more feeling to understanding and knowing each other's community. So I just wanted to, say, thank you for giving me the time today to be able to come in. And, sometimes it's a little heavy when we have to go through this. Sometimes, it's hard to understand because things have been one way for such a long time, that when change comes, that those opportunities that we have to make a decision, are we going to go with change or are we not, really kind of takes an effect on how we are as a community. We've always been here, we're not going. There's a connection that I have and that we have as an indigenous communities, that we're always going to be here, just to know that the best way for us to move forward all together, natives and non-natives, is to be able to work together. And to be able to work and to have a good working relationship, we have to know one another. So thank you for your time. Oh. I had a Q&A, but I guess we're good.
Can I ask a quick question
Sure.
since I'm at the mic? Thanks.
Sure.
You mentioned that the National Native American Historic Society maintain an inventory of tribal cultural resource. Do they also do that for non-federally recognized tribes or just?
You know what? I mean, I know they take, well, yeah, they do.
Okay,
Yeah, they do.
great.
I know, as long as there's a submission that's to it, because they also recognize non-federally recognized tribes, MLDs, right? So anytime there's a project that's in, an area where there's not a non-federally recognized tribe, if they've submitted their paperwork to the state, they'll be contacted.
Great. And one more quick question.
Sure.
We talked about this a couple of years ago, and you mentioned it in the slide. Federal agencies with federal dollars have to do government-to-government consultations. Do local agencies who receive federal dollars also? Has that
Yes.
changed? They do? Okay.
Yeah, and the good thing about that is if you have a local agency who's reluctant to consult with the tribes and they got federal money, the feds are going to make sure that they comply with consulting with the tribes.
Great.
And so there's just that extra tier that we have, that making sure, and now there's a lot of agencies that actually have tribal liaisons, right? Tribal, a tribal program, or not, I don't want to call it a program, but tribal representatives for their agencies to make sure that they're complying with that. And so, yeah, normally that's what happens. They're supposed to make sure that they comply with 106.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Robert, thank you so much for your time. We're going to go ahead and do any other questions.
Just one
One
question,
question,
real quick.
okay.
Chairman Cromwell, Robbins Rancheria,
Hey.
thank you for being here
Yeah.
and sharing your word and your message and your and the history of our people. Thank you for that medicine.
Thanks.
My question is more. You went through the laws, the state laws and the federal laws, and about a month ago in the newspaper on the front cover was Koi Nation going in a lawsuit with the city of Clear Lake
Yep.
over some building they want to do there, and they want it for the children, and you're stopping this business. And I just wanted to share how challenging that might be, or just any information you can share when we read that it's just one-sided. You know what I mean? There's no background that these local publications go into with these laws or these tribal leaders, and sometimes they can't say anything. They're in a lawsuit. So just trying to share, like, we're currently in one of those. I feel like because they speak on the artifacts and the things that you spoke of today. So just any information that you can share, what its challenges.
Yeah, like I said, I hit on this earlier, was, during time, things have been set one way for a very long time, and when change happens, there's usually a reluctancy, especially when I think people that are in those positions to be able to make the determinations on how the process is going to go. I think when that change happens to where they don't have the authority, right, anymore to dictate how the process is going to go, that's a hard thing for some people. And so we're hoping, right, and we're, trust me, it's been really a bad situation, but we're hoping that there can be a relationship both with the city and the tribe to be able to go, forward with development. But, like I said, everyone has to be open. We have to understand what these laws are, and to know that they're set in place for a reason, and to know that, they're there to make sure that they're adhered to, and that really at the end of the day, when we're walking away from the table, everyone feels comfortable, whatever the development part of it, and then also the protection of the tribal cultural resources. It can happen. It just has to, there has to be good communication, open mind, and open heart to, to each other about what needs to happen. But the community really needs to understand and know that, and I tell every landowner and everyone here, Lake County is just a highly sensitive area. And if you talk to any archaeologist and you talk to any anthropologist, and where's their dream place to go, because everything is just so, sensitive that's here, it's like, I want to go to Lake County, right? And it's just, and I tell planners and everyone else, it is just the way it is. the way that the, non-native community comes here and looks at it and kind of go, this is a beautiful place. Our ancestors said, this is my home. This is where we're going to be because of what it provided. It was clear, it was fresh water, clear water. It was, unlimited resources. Like I said, we're world renowned for baskets. We made baskets at a bigger scale level because of the resources that we had available, right? There's so many things that happen here specifically in this place. And we're talking about the hitch. The hitch is only indicative to Lake County, right? Only indicative to here. And we're trying to save that, which is a TCR. But it's just it's a hard thing, but it's not going to change. The tribes aren't going anywhere. The counties aren't going anywhere, so let's sit down together and create a good working relationship on respect, right, and understanding. So that.
Let's give Robert another round of applause and thank him
Thank you.
for making time in his very full and very busy schedule.